Welcome to Growth Beyond Boundaries, where coaches explore the stories, tension points, and moments of breakthrough that help you transform. Each episode opens practical insight into the coaching process and the possibilities it creates. Join us as we lean into your growth with courage and curiosity. This is episode 29, Delegation. Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about delegation today, and I'm joined by Phyllis Collins and Teresa Schwab, and of course, I'm Andy Huckabee, your host. So let's get this started by defining what delegation really is. I want to start maybe with a metaphor, because you all know how much I love metaphors, right? Delegation might be looked at as taking something off of your plate and putting it on someone else's plate. Okay, from a metaphoric standpoint, that might be a visual that people can look at. But it's an intentional act of entrusting meaningful work to others. It's not dumping. It's not abdicating. It's just an intentional act. And I teach this a lot, and I know you two have had your rounds teaching this topic as well to classes or working through it. When people become a manager, they are entrusted with resources to do more than they could possibly do by themselves. Without delegation, they're just trying to scramble to do everything. With delegation, they balance that load and they help their people grow. And so it's really a strategic use of resources far beyond what one person can accomplish alone. Now, Teresa, Phyllis, what do you think?
No, I was just going to say you started with the metaphor, which I think is a really good one. I'm trying to think about how we would continue the metaphor in terms of being a manager or supervisor or someone who's trying to engage other people. I'm having trouble moving the metaphor any further than that. But I do like the idea of moving it from one plate to another without just giving it to somebody because you don't want to eat it. Maybe that's how we follow the metaphor. It's really more because we want them to taste it, or we want them to have the experience of tasting whatever it is you're moving to their plate. And that's the difference between using delegation as abdication versus using delegation as something as a way that engages other people.
And another one, I don't know if this will follow with the metaphor. We'll figure it out. But I also think of it as in the example you gave about especially a new leader, and them trying to hold on to their old work as a performer or a doer.
Yeah.
Or contributing something specific, a product specific, and now becoming a leader and recognizing that your work has completely changed. And now you are a leader of people versus leader of a project or a specific task. And just getting that wrapped around your head that now it's not just, I'm going to continue eating all the stuff that's on my plate. Now, I'm not very good at metaphors like you, Andy, but it's like, am I going to eat all of this food that's on my plate, even though now I'm in a new position? Or do I almost have to get up out of my seat and move to another seat that has different food at it? So I'm not sure, again, if that goes with the metaphor, but it's just a matter of why are you bringing some of your work with you?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the questions, right? It is symptom that we see a lot of times with people who were a super performer before
Yes.
and now promoted into a management position because they were a super performer before,
Right.
right? And in the back of their mind, they're thinking, gee, if I just continue to do what I did before, I'll get rewarded again. And sometimes that actually does happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what happens is you see someone whose plate, back to the metaphor, is way
Mm-hmm.
too full,
It's way too full.
that their balance gets completely out of whack, that all of a sudden they're not working a 40-hour work week, they're working 80 hours because they're trying to be both a super performer and a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably suffering at both. And so when they make that transition, just like you said, Phyllis, they become about the people when they become a manager. Their job is to help their people perform at the highest level they possibly can. It's not
I
the work itself. And it's just, it's a real struggle for a lot of people because they don't know how to do it and it's never been modeled for them.
Yeah. Andy, sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking about a story of training that I was doing years and years ago when we were having this conversation, and there was a woman who was sitting at the front of the room, not too far from me in the training room, and I could see her just bury her head in her hands, and she was shaking her head, and I just couldn't help it. I was like, what is going on? And she said, oh my gosh, this resonates with me so much because I used to be really, really good at what I do. People would call me up. I designed systems and processes that people around the world would call me up and ask me how I did it. And then I got promoted, and now I feel completely incompetent. And we all got a good laugh at that. But in some ways, what you all are describing is I was really good at it and I felt really competent at it. And now I'm moving into people, and people are not tasks, and people are complicated and they're complex. And then mixing in this whole, how do I delegate and do that well when inside I might be fearful of letting go of the task because I feel good about doing that, or fearful about letting the task go because if it doesn't get done well, then the buck's going to stop with me, and that pressure that I'm feeling to have it done well starts to well up inside me. There's such an internal experience, I think, to the delegation that gets in the way of people delegating well. It's not just a oh, go do this. There's a lot of stuff going on internally inside people, and we see this all the time as coaches, not just trainers at the front of the room, but when we're working with individual leaders and individual conversations about getting better at what they do, we start to hear these pieces that are so hard for folks about letting things go. And it's complicated and it's complex.
You said something, Teresa, that I want to think about a little bit here. You talked about something being done well. I would say that a lot of times people don't delegate not because things aren't going to be done well. They aren't going to be done exactly like I do them.
Right.
Which is my definition of the perfect way to do it, which may
Right.
not be the only way to do it.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to piggyback on something Teresa talked about as it almost being looked at as like an individual's problem. And because this can cascade throughout an entire organization. I was brought into an organization, it was a financial organization. And the main reason for bringing me in to do training, leadership training, was this organization, their product was a financial output of a product. And they noticed that all of their top performers literally would not apply for the jobs, for leaders, for the next leader. Mainly because, again, they were tops in school in the accounting area. They got in this job. They became, really, really, really good at doing that job, and a lot of fulfillment out of being good. This was an organization that had to meet some strict daily deadlines. And so they really got good at their jobs. But then they wouldn't apply for the manager's job partly because they were afraid of, this is a new task. I didn't go to school to learn how to be a manager or a leader. I don't want to do that. And so we brought in to do the leadership training. Well, some of them started. I won't even say they applied. They were kind of hired to be the the new leaders. They were kind of forced into it. But then the problem came up, and this is again company wide. So it wasn't just the individual. It was all of the individuals because they were so good at their jobs. Literally,
Yeah.
that was their comfort. That was their comfort, their sweet spot. They still kept
Their
piling on.
identity.
Their identity was tied
Right.
up into, I like being the top performer. I like solving all the problems. I was rewarded for that. Now, this is not just one person. This is a whole group of brand new leaders. And that was one of the hardest things to work on, was the whole delegation aspect, because their plates were so full, and yet they still had these looming daily deadlines that they realized, I cannot work with people and work with numbers at the same time and go home, without gripping the steering wheel.
or go home at all.
Right. And so they kind of had to realize there aren't enough hours in the day for me to hold on to my things and now do this new thing that I'm not, like you said, Teresa, they weren't as good at, but their identity, I think, was so tied into, I was the smart kid. I was the smart performer. I worked to be the smart performer. I went to college to be the smart person. And now you're ripping that away, and I have to deal with people. So some of it is so tied up, and I would put that in the somewhat of the fear category. So again, they don't want to get rid of it because they fear what will happen to my identity. I was looked at as the smart one. I was looked at as the one who could get things done. So that fear factor plays into it. And the one thing for that organization is, it wasn't just an individual. It was a whole class of employees who are now their leaders, but those were their high potential employees that their identity was so wrapped up, they couldn't think about somebody else doing the work that they were really good at.
Yeah.
That's such a great story, Phyllis, and the impact system-wide of that phenomenon is really important for the system to pay attention to as they're supporting people to move into those positions, to move away from task-based work and really deal with the losses that they're going to experience as they make that transition. And speaking of loss, I think another one that I experienced, so I do a lot of coaching inside healthcare organizations, mental health centers, social service agencies, lots of places in which the primary folks are helpers, or their identity is around helping. And one of the things I hear a lot from people is, well, my people are so busy. They're already overwhelmed. They're already so busy. I don't want to give them anything else. So I just take it on myself just so that I don't put that burden on them. And it's another fear. It's another identity that people have trouble letting go of, is this, I'm going to overload someone, or I'm going to make their life harder because I'm giving them more work to do. So part of that work in coaching then is to help them reframe what that looks like, and to give up, or maybe not give up the identity of helper, but how do you maybe shift the story about what a helper is or what a helper does in that kind of context.
And so if we could even hold on to that Andy, you started out by giving us that definition of an intentional act of entrusting that meaningful work to others, and it's not dumping. I think a big part, at least when I'm coaching, and I think I'm hearing this with both of you, is at some point it has to completely be reframed.
Yeah.
We have to watch even the words we're using on, is it delegation or is it dumping? Is it delegation or is it giving people truly opportunities for growth? And I know we're going to talk about some of that later, but I think the reframing is going to be a big part of the concept of delegation.
I think so. back to what makes it so hard, I think trust is a big part. If I give them the work, they're not going to do it the way I would do it. We mentioned that.
Mhm.
Control, wanting the work done your way, or sometimes you just enjoy the work and you want to control it that way. Time, believing the teaching people to do it well takes too long. It's just easier if I do it myself.
And
Is the
unfortunately,
narrative.
that's true. Initially,
Sometimes it is true.
somewhat
It
true.
could be. And my response back to people who say that is, it may be true one time, but it may
Right.
not be true 10 times.
Right.
And you begin to look at how these things pile up when you don't move them from your plate to someone else's. Fear, a loss of value, identity, reputation, that fear of letting go. It's kind of the control thing again in play. Your identity. I'm identified with this quality work. In fact, I was rewarded for it, and I was made a manager. They don't really say I was made a manager. They just say I was rewarded for it. And so that sticks in the back of their mind, and they just kind of think, to get rewarded again, I'll just do what I did before. That's what they know, right? My people are too busy. Teresa, you mentioned that already. Or I have no one to delegate to, which could be a mindset barrier, right? I don't have anybody to delegate to. And they're not thinking broad enough. They're just thinking what's under their direct control, not what's under their circle of influence.
And you know, that's especially true for individual contributors
Yeah.
that are pretty high and pretty significant in an organization, but they don't have direct reports. So getting them to expand or again, reframe who's out there and who could you delegate to? Could you even delegate upwards to peers? Or in fact, it's sometimes one of the harder ones because they literally don't have a staff, but just getting them to broaden their horizons as to, well, let's rethink that.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people, Phyllis, sorry to interrupt again, Andy, but there are a lot of folks that I work with in coaching who are an individual contributor, but they also have to get things done. So they have to learn to lead with influence versus authority. And there is something to this notion of, I think it, again, to your reframe idea, is the ability to really reframe delegation into inviting someone in. So extending an invitation, making a request of somebody, inviting them in to help and support is a way to share the work collaboratively, and in that process also build those relationships that help you build influence. So it's an interesting, I think we're back to this kind of let's reframe what delegation is and what it can do for you, because it's very different than just giving somebody a task and telling them to go do it.
Right. Yeah.
Those two big words of the reframe are, like you said, delegation does sound like a chore. It sounds like, again, but influencing. Oh, now that sounds a little bit better. Collaborating with my peers sounds even a little bit better, and it could still be the same thing. But but what you call it can just shift that mindset. So I just love those words of influencing, collaboration, building teams, even though you don't have a staff.
Building capacity.
You have a staff.
Yeah. Building capacity, right?
Right. Yes.
Some misconceptions. Delegation is abdication. I'm just throwing it over the wall and let somebody else do it. That's a misconception. Only small tasks can be delegated. That's a misconception. Delegation is dumping. And I've heard a lot of people say, I don't want to dump extra work on people. It's a normal way people think about delegation. Delegation is not that. The narrative, it's faster if I do it myself. That's a misconception. And that individual contributors can't delegate. Well, certainly they can because they have a circle of influence and people that they can engage in their work. And that can be delegation. And so we have to broaden our look at the idea of delegation, not to just be what some people might think is just dumping the stuff, taking the stuff off my plate that I don't want to do. And it's a lot different than that.
And a lot of those misconceptions sound negative. And if we keep going back to that reframing, how can we reframe it to a positive, a positive or a win-win? And I hesitate to throw out the word, how can we make it an opportunity? Because we know to say, I have an opportunity for you could sound just as bad as, here comes
Stay
the
careful,
dump.
Robinson.
Right, here
Yeah.
comes the dump. I'm seeing, oh boy. But if we can make it a true opportunity, over time, people will trust that this opportunity is going to benefit not only them or me. It might just benefit me, because if it's going to help me in my career or help me learn a new skill, I wouldn't get it otherwise unless someone delegated it to me or gave me that true opportunity. But delegation, I think, is starting to become a negative word.
Yeah, and probably not just starting to become, it's probably been a negative word because of the way
Yeah, I
people
agree.
have used it. So that's a beautiful bridge into Andy's 3 rules of delegation. I will admit very openly that I've borrowed pieces of this from other people. There hasn't been a lot of direct writing on what I'm about to talk about. There are lots of books on delegation, but I'm not sure they're as concise as what I want to share with you. So 3 rules of delegation. Rule number 1, when we don't delegate, we rob our people of the opportunity for growth. Okay, so what that means is when we're withholding this work, these tasks, these projects, and so forth from our people, we're robbing them of the opportunity to stretch into something new, to grow, to experience something new. And that's a really big, important thing for people who are in management roles to begin to understand and realize. This isn't dumping. This is development. This is exposure. This is experience. This is all of these things that we're trying to help our people as they develop.
Can
Our
I
job
share
is-
another quick story that
Sure.
fits right with that? I was coaching a guy who he was an engineer, and again, smart, got a lot of opportunities. He got this new boss that came into the company. In his words, this boss wasn't worth his salt. All he did was just dump everything on him. Every time something came up, he'd always give it to him. And he just thought, I just couldn't believe. And this is why he hated to delegate, was because this boss, he had such, kind of animus toward this boss. And I said, well, so where is that boss now? I said, is he still your boss? And he said, no. He went on to another company, and he's now the CEO of a competitor type company. And he stopped. And he said, oh. I said, well, what happened afterwards? He said, then I got his job. And I said, why do you think you got his job? He said, oh, because he taught me everything. And it didn't hit him that this guy, who actually made it known that he was always looking for bigger opportunities in his career period. But he didn't realize that the reason he was selected to fill that person's position is that guy had brought him all along. He now realizes the guy knew how to do the stuff all along. But he was selected because that boss trusted him that he would learn those things and grow. And it didn't hit him until afterwards, and he thought, oh, well, maybe I guess I should start delegating to find my next successor. But he literally the whole time did not see it as opportunity for growth. It just looked at the time like it was a lot of work. Now, I don't know how the boss gave it to him, but looking back, he could realize that boss was grooming him. I don't know that the boss ever used those words though.
I love the word grooming though, because I think that that is part of what delegation does. Is it, again, it allows our people to grow, to stretch, to experience things. It also helps to build bench strength. It helps to build capacity. It helps eliminate those single points of failure within an organization where if somebody is gone, then everything falls apart. And delegation helps to solve those things, assuming that you're doing it well.
Can I offer one other thing on this rule that you just offered, which is the opposite experience that I've seen over and over in coaching and heard this from people that I've been coaching is a theme that sounds something like, well, my boss doesn't trust me. They don't give me any tasks, right? They're withholding things. They do things on their own, things that I should be doing or things that I could do. And I've asked if they'll give it to me or they'll allow me to learn how to do it, and they'll say no. And there's the impact of not delegating, even if we're doing it for a good reason, even if we're trying to protect our people, not overwhelm them, whatever the reason is, the experience of the person that's not being delegated to is often they're withholding and they don't trust me. So there's sort of this dark undertone to the message of not delegating that I don't think we think about. Most people are doing it probably for a productive reason, even if it's fear-based, even if it's about control, they're still trying to get a good outcome. But at the end of the day, when we don't delegate, our people have an experience of, why don't they trust me? These are things that I could do. And that's something I think we don't necessarily think about, is the experience that other people might have when we don't delegate.
Yeah.
And then we're surprised when they leave.
Right.
Yeah. Because they haven't been challenged or they haven't been given that opportunity to grow.
Correct.
Exactly.
So restating rule number one, when we don't delegate, we rob our people of the opportunity for growth. That's rule number one. Rule number two, there is no task too big to delegate. Okay, so what this means is that if you say there is a task too big to delegate, you're saying I'm the only one smart enough or good enough to do this. And the answer to that statement is always, you got to be kidding me. I mean, really, come on. That there, in fact, could be people within your organization who could do it much better than you could do it. But you're hanging on to it for a reason. Back to some of those problems, why it's so hard to delegate. You're hanging on to it because you have identity with that it's something you do really well. It's something you really look forward to doing, right? It's something you enjoy doing. And so you hang on to it. A stronger word is you hoard the work, right? You're a hoarder. And in the meantime, you may be delegating other pieces of things that you don't want to do to people, but your people aren't getting a chance to do the real fun stuff, the juicy stuff, the meaningful stuff. And because you're holding on to it and it's too hard for you to give up.
And I think the thing you didn't say is high profile. Sometimes people keep all of the high profile things, the things that are going to bring them lots of accolades, the things that are going to be seen by external people, and they hoard those tasks. And that actually undermines your influence with other people when you take all of the high profile tasks. So I think along with the things you enjoy that are meaningful, I think we need to be honest and say sometimes people hoard the high profile things, and that can actually also backfire.
And they hoard I'm so important that only I with my title can do this.
Right.
And I know I've experienced some, again, working with people in the finances or engineering. There are some legalities to keeping certain projects at a higher level. So the question becomes, that could be true. Again, that's a true, quote unquote, well, I don't even know if it's a quote unquote, it's a true barrier as to what can you delegate. But while you may not be able to delegate away the the authority, I guess, are there parts of the responsibility that you can delegate? When it comes to, because of my big title and because I'm so important, I'm the only one who can review this and sign off on it. And it's like, well, the signing off, yes. The reviewing, is there not anybody else on your team who could do parts of that? So, like you said, if you think it's too big, is there any way to break it down? But yeah, I think sometimes the question to ask in coaching, I always think, is, why is it too big?
Yeah.
Because it's often big for some of the other reasons, like you said, the hoarding. There's that hoarding aspect of, because I'm important, this is too high profile, I like doing it. There's always an I in there.
Yeah. The classes that I teach on this particular topic, we talk about, people ask the questions, well, I'm not very good at this. How do I get started? And my answer is, find that thing you like to do the most, that you truly are identified with or protecting. Find that thing and delegate that first. What you're doing is, number one, you're learning how to let go and trust your people. You're giving a message to them that when you delegate work, it's not just the busy stuff, it's the meaty stuff and the high profile stuff and the fun stuff, and you're willing to let go of it and do that. And I've had people come back a year later and talk about their experience in doing that, and it's transformational. And I could talk about that a little bit as we move forward. So, rule number one, when we don't delegate, we rob our people of the opportunity for growth. Rule number two, there's no task too big to delegate. And rule number three, delegation is not abdication. When you delegate, you're not just throwing it over the fence and forgetting about it. Your role has fundamentally changed from someone who is doing the work to someone who is supporting the work and the people doing the work. And when you delegate, the beginning of it is really important, establishing the expectations and talking through the process and talking through how to start with someone. And then letting them know that you're there to support them, to talk through things with them. But you're not grabbing the work back from them when you do that. You're just supporting them through it. Your role fundamentally changes when you don't abdicate. Unfortunately, a lot of managers who delegate just throw it over the fence. And then they wonder why the outcomes aren't what they hoped they would be. And so
Which is another terrible way to undermine influence and trust, is to throw it over the fence, let it get done, never check in on it, never support, and then at the end, hate the product and then undo it or redo it.
Right.
And then you've really done more damage than if you had supported and done what you just described all along.
So we've got these three rules of delegation, and they kind of set a foundation, I think, for people to begin to say, we're going to start doing this differently. I had a woman in one of my classes come up to me in a different class a year later or so and say, I felt convicted, Andy, when you talked about delegation, because I knew I wasn't doing it well. I knew I wasn't actually doing it at all. And I knew I was working way too much. And I also knew that my team was not overly engaged in the work that we were doing. They weren't very enthusiastic. And so I started thinking about doing exactly what you said. And I took that one thing I love to do most, that thing that I was hanging on to, and I delegated it. And I stayed in touch. I supported, I thought about my role differently as a manager of people, not a manager of the work itself. And she said, it transformed our whole department. That all of a sudden people were enthusiastic and excited about coming into work every day, that they were working on meaningful things that they could understand the purpose of. She said, and things actually, people had ideas that I had never thought of in terms of working on the pieces. She said, my biggest problem was I felt a little guilty because I wasn't working as hard as I used to. Interesting, right? But once again, she didn't have to come up to me and tell me this story, but she said it completely changed not only the way she managed people, but changed just the engagement and enthusiasm of the people that work for her.
And
I think we've used that word engagement several times in this conversation.
Right.
And to me, when you hear sort of culturally out in the world around organizations, a lot of organizations are talking about disengagement right now, people not feeling engaged or motivated at work. So delegation is a very strategic leadership move that does provide engagement. When you give work back to people, give them ownership of something, let them roll their sleeves up and figure out how to do something with your support, they feel ownership in it. And when they feel like they own it, then the engagement goes up. And then when you come alongside them and support them, you're building the relationships, which are building trust. All of those things are things that we know are the conditions under which organizations thrive. When there's high engagement, high motivation, high trust, people want to come to work. Those are all ways in which organizations really thrive. And delegation is a key strategy to be able to make that happen.
And again, an organizational strategy. So again, It's not just that one person, it's the snowball effect of the woman, Andy, that you were working with, how she saw that productivity and capacity build and her people growing for just her department. Imagine multiplying that across the organization. And so I think organizations do have almost a responsibility to help their people learn how to delegate.
All right. And yet they don't.
I know.
They have something they call delegation, but as you ask people in a class or in a room or coaching people, how well do you delegate? If they really think about it, they recognize they don't really. They're not very good at it.
And going back to that, it's a skill. And as we've been talking about this, I'm hearing two funnels, things we talk about again at the Kansas Leadership Center of technical aspect of it, and then the adaptable aspect of it. The adaptable is getting your heads wrapped around it, reframing it, understanding why we really don't do it deep down with that control, fear, trust, whatever's causing you internally not to want to do it. But then once you get your head wrapped around it, then it becomes you don't throw it over the wall. There's a famous article in the Harvard Business Review called Who's Got the Monkey? And in short, it's basically talking about how we always feel like, oh, I have all these monkeys on my back. I got to get them off. And so we just start throwing the monkeys over the cubicles into somebody else's office. And then we leave. But then we wonder how those monkeys come back in our office before we get back. And it's because we just threw it. We didn't go through the technical aspects that are necessary. Identifying who, first of all, why do I need to delegate this? That's a question. And I always say this is part of the mindset of delegation. Why do you need to delegate? Well, who's going to benefit? You don't want to just throw it. You want to be able to influence or explain to the person why you think this particular thing is not only something you want to give them an opportunity, but why you also specifically chose them.
Right.
So there's a why am I doing this? Who do I need to give this opportunity to, like the true opportunity to? What are my, I think you said, Andy, earlier, what are my expectations from them? What expectations do I still need? What role do I need to play in this? Again, I'm not just slinging it over the cubicle. I now may have a role, and that could be review, be available for questions. So there's those technical things that also are there that you increase the odds once you've come to terms with you do want to delegate it, then how do I do it to where it's the most successful? And being good at both sides, the adaptive piece of getting your own head wrapped around it, the adaptive piece of getting their heads wrapped around it, but then the technical of, and here's how I do it to increase the odds.
You mentioned I want to feed off of this because this idea of the monkeys coming back into my office.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a theory or metaphor, whatever. Here I am with metaphors again, but theory, metaphor called the vending machine metaphor. And I've talked to both of you about this before. In fact, Teresa, I think you and I did a podcast that included this. But it's this idea that people complain that people just keep coming in and out of their offices asking questions, right? The vending machine metaphor says somebody comes in your office, they drop a coin in the machine, they get a candy bar, and tomorrow they drop a coin in the machine and they get a candy bar, and the third day they drop a coin in the machine and get a candy bar. And has that person really grown in that exercise? Well, they may have grown in girth because they're eating too many candy bars, but the reality is this happens quite often with people, where the manager is the so-called expert or authority on everything. And people out of habit come in and say, how do I do this? And what they're effectively doing is they're throwing the monkey back into your office, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take a moment and not just fall to the temptation of giving them the candy bar or answering the question, if instead you say, if I weren't sitting here right now, what would you do? Then you're giving them the monkey back, mm-hmm. making them or giving them the opportunity, right, to actually solve the problem, to work through the problem. And you might even ask them questions to help them through that process, but it's their monkey. Mm-hmm. And don't let them give it back to you. So that's just, when you talked about the monkeys always coming back to my office, there are ways to do this where as a manager, you become more coach-like, where instead of just giving the answer, doing the tell, you ask a question to engage them at a deeper level. Because 9 times out of 10, they probably know what the answer is. They've just gotten into a habit of always coming in asking for that quick fix, that quick candy bar. Don't be the vending machine for them.
And another thing, and I'm going to play off of one of your rules, Andy, of delegation is not abdication. If you have truly thought through this thing that I want to delegate or give as an opportunity to somebody else, you also have to make it clear that delegation is not only abdication, it's also not me asking you for a favor.
Right.
Because sometimes it's like we think right around vacation time. Oh, I need to give this to somebody to do while I'm gone because the deadline or is going to happen while I'm gone. So I'll ask so-and-so to do that for me. And it's like, well, that's the same opportunity as you could make that a forever ask. Mm-hmm.
Right.
But if you don't make that clear, they truly think, even after you've taught them how to do it or given them, influenced them and had some discussion back and forth, they think they're just doing it for this one time until you get back, and then they'll take that monkey and give it back to you when you come back from vacation. Versus, no, I want to give you this monkey. He is now your pet, and it's going to be yours forever. And you wouldn't say it quite like that, but it's not. You're asking them to do a favor. This is something you really want them to take on.
Yeah.
And you trust that they can do it. So again, it goes back into even watching your language when you so-called delegate. Are you asking for a favor? Like when you sling these things, just throw them over the cubicle. What truly was that expectation?
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you were saying, and the word that's coming to mind as you're talking is that delegation, when it's at its best, is strategic. So we think about, what is our purpose? Why are we delegating, and what do we hope to get out of the act of delegating? I was just going to tell another quick story about how you can use delegation strategically, even to change culture. So this may not be about individual development, but I had a friend who grew up in a family. We're just coming off of Thanksgiving here, so this is timely. I had a friend who grew up in a family in a very rural part of the country, where the family culture was that all of the women do all the work. So the women do all the prep, all the cleaning, all the cooking. Everybody sits down for the meal. And then afterward, the women get up, they pick everything up, they clean everything up, and they spend all of their time in the kitchen while the men are mostly sitting in the easy chair watching football. So all they do is eat while everyone else is doing everything else. Well, this woman had boys. And so in front of everyone at the meal, she said, "Hey, boys, your job today is to clean up. So I'm putting you on cleanup duty." So the strategy was to send a message to the culture that we're shifting here. These expectations are different in this culture, and gave some of that work back. So it was somewhat about individual development, so that they also knew they had some responsibility in a family, in that culture. But it also sent a message to the broader culture to say, it's time for things to shift. So I think about, in an organization, thinking about what's the culture, who do you delegate to, for what purpose, and what message are you trying to send? When you think about your purpose of delegation, the strategy then can become even broader than just individual development. It actually can be culture transformation.
I agree.
Love it. So let's perhaps wind down here a little bit, just with some basic ideas, thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with regarding delegation. And I'll start. I want you to remember Andy's 3 rules of delegation, because I think they're foundational for anybody who is in a management role, and really anybody who's in any kind of role, that as they begin to look at those truths, they realize, yeah, I can do a better job here.
And I would say, for me, it's the question of, do you delegate currently? And if not, why not? And if you do, are you doing it the best way that you could? Are you being as intentional and purposeful about delegation as you can be? And if you're not delegating, you might have to look pretty deep into yourself about why you're not. What fear do you have? What do you not want to give up? Why do you not want to give it up? How is your identity tied to the tasks? And then this reframe of, what could you gain if you did give it up? Is sort of a 2-part process. So that, to me, feels really important in delegation, because delegation really isn't a head issue. It's a heart and gut for a lot of people. And to have to go into your heart and gut and really get true with yourself about why you're not delegating and what the impact of it could be, might really shift and open up and be transformational in your ability to lead organizations, lead other people, get your work done, and get great outcomes.
I don't know. That was so very well said, Teresa. That really was.
Well, thank
As
you,
I was
Phyllis.
listening to you, I thought, okay, what else could you add? What else could you add? And I thought, well, the more you talked, I thought, well, I don't have anything to add to that other than just to reemphasize, because I hadn't thought about using this language. So a reframe for me is that delegation is not a task, it is a strategy. Because I think that encompasses the whole think through this like any other strategy you would have. Why is it important? Who should I give this to? Why? Why is it important for them? And why is it important for me? And why is it important for the organization? And that's the part that I don't think people always think about it. I think they do think about it as a more personal thing. And it is. It is for all the reasons we've discussed. Because I definitely agree that when it comes to coaching or individual growth, it is more about the heart than the head part on delegation. And once we can wrap our heads and our hearts around it, I think it does move it into the strategy versus task.
Yeah. I would say, just in closing, that it absolutely is a strategy, and it's a strategy for an organization to use their resources in the best possible way they can use it. Our managers out there, you were given these resources to do much more than you could possibly do by yourself. But if you're not utilizing those resources, you're not growing those resources, you're not delegating to those resources, then you're not utilizing their abilities, their capacity, and the organization doesn't benefit from that. And then also, just fundamentally, your role as a manager when you delegate fundamentally changes from that super performer to the super manager. What does it look like to become that super manager? And lastly, we have an opportunity as we delegate to model what delegation really looks like and means to an organization for all of those people that are involved in this work. And part of the problem and the reason why it hasn't happened well in the past is that there are not many great models out there. And so now we have an opportunity to model that.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa and Phyllis, thank you for your time. Great discussion. And we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Growth Beyond Boundaries. We hope today's episode gave you the inspiration and tools to push past limits and achieve meaningful growth. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support helps us reach more people on their growth journeys. Remember, growth starts with one step, one conversation, and one decision to go beyond boundaries. Until next time, keep challenging the limits and discovering your potential. See you soon.